Hey, everybody, this is Brian Smith back with another episode of Grief to Growth. And today I've got my good friend, Peter Panagore. Peter and I have talked a few times. We've done a few interviews together, and we talk on Facebook all the time. I've known Peter for, I guess, about a year or so now, a couple of years. But I feel like I know him really well, and I'm really excited to have Peter with us today. So I want to go ahead and read his introduction, and then we'll get right into the conversation. Reverend Peter Panagore, Master of Divinity of Yale, is the author of two bestsellers, 2 Minutes for God, which is a seven day a week, 365-day collection of inspirational devotions that aired daily for 15 years on two NBC stations in Maine to an audience of 80,000 a day. He's also the author of Heaven is Beautiful, How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning, and that's available in 9 editions globally, including in Kindle, Audible, and paperback. After 15 years on TV and FM radio, Peter soon headed back into the pastoral ministry in New England. His two near-death experiences and a lifetime of yoga, meditation, and prayer practice, and his practical life as a minister for 18 years sets him apart among his peers. Peter is a mystic, a husband, a dad, and a grandpa. Peter races his crew on sailboats. He reads science and literature. He occasionally swears, and Peter always seeks God. Peter says he's not religious, but that his boss is God. And I want to welcome back Peter. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you eye to eye again, Brian.
Yeah, it's really great. I watch you all the time on Facebook. It's great. You're traveling around to different churches and speaking on Sunday mornings, and you stream it live to Facebook. So that's really great. I love watching you do that.
Well, thanks. It's been an interesting experiment for me because, of course, I'm not looking at the camera when I'm looking at the congregation. So it's like breaking all the rules.
Yeah, exactly. But they're great. I love your sermons. I love hearing. I love what you're doing. You and I have talked several times. I'm familiar with your near-death experiences, but my audience might not be. So if you could share with me, what it is, your near-death experiences, how they impacted your life.
I'll start before just to give a context because we started with religion.
Yeah.
So I was raised Roman Catholic and Greek Orthodox, went to Catholic high school. I had a charismatic Christian experience. I was in a prayer group. And so I was a pretty serious, faithful person. And then I went off to Montana to go to school for a year as an exchange student. And I ended up a backpacker, mountaineer, ski patrol, first responder, outdoor guy. So I had this opportunity to go ice climbing and snow caving in Alberta and British Columbia during spring break. And so I went and had a great few days snow caving out in the wilderness and skiing in the backcountry. And then we went ice climbing. And for your audience's sake, I'll make it as short as possible. So I made a mistake in the climb. I decided to use an axe and a hammer. It was my first ice climb. I'd been rock climbing quite a bit. But my mistake with the hammer was that you couldn't ever let go of the hammer. You're supposed to have two ice axes. If anybody sees a video on it, you'll know what I'm talking about, two ice axes. Well, the ice axe I was using on my left hand was the right length, and the one on my right was too short. Long story short, it slowed our climb down significantly, and we got to the top of the climb by about sunset. And all the other teams had already descended. It wasn't a very high climb, 500-600 feet. Right off the highway, Ice Fields Parkway and Banff Provincial Park. And so, but it's an isolated place. The sun went down, the temperature rose. What am I saying? I got to calm down for a second. I'm a little nervous. I don't know. Okay, hold on. Yeah, so the temperature fell, of course, because it's March in Canada and it dropped about 30 degrees and hypothermia set in pretty immediately. And we hauled up the rope. It became a big, huge knot. And hypothermia is a killer. And being a first responder, I knew the situation that we were in, and so did my partner, Tim. And long story short, we got to the last rappel by driving ourselves through the night across the traversing and rappelling and traversing and rappelling. And we finally got to the last pitch, and we're about 150 feet up. But it was somewhere before dawn. My feet were frozen like blocks of ice. My hands were frostbitten. My face frostbitten. Not third degree. I still have my nose and cheeks, but I can't feel my big toe, and my hands hurt pretty much whenever the temperature hits 50. So the cellular damage that I'm left with, and so the ice climb was over. We were on the rock and descending 150 feet down. That's all that we had left. The rope was jammed around the corner. I still had one end attached to me. The other end I had tossed out. And when I first pulled, it got jammed. And I began to fall asleep. And sleep is the last stage. I'd gone through the stage of getting hot, and I unzipped my coat. I should tell the audience, it's like, I had guessed 0 degrees out. There's no wind. The moon's 3/4. There's a million stars in the sky. There's rock face in front of me. There's huge, beautiful view out to behind me. Super peaceful place. There's no traffic because there's no people. And no offense to the Albertans, but there's very few people who live up there. And so there was nobody driving by on the highway down below us. And we were alone, and we were stuck, and I knew I was going to die. And I began to fall asleep. I'd collapse and hit the rock. And then I'd pull myself back up because I was harnessed in. And then I pulled myself up this time. And as I stood there, my partner, Tim, was also hitched into the rock to my left, but too far away to help me pull the rope. And we were afraid I was going to drop the rope if I detached it from my harness because my hands were frozen. And so I stood up and I looked around, and his peripheral vision kind of began to close like this. And I looked around and I thought, what's going on? Never seen this before. And I collapsed. And as I collapsed, like I had done a half a dozen times before when I fell asleep, I expected to hit the rock and wake back up again. Mm-hmm. But only this time when I collapsed, my mind didn't shut off like I fell asleep. My mind stayed active. And I never hit the rock. I just was why am I still awake? Mm-hmm. And my vision opened up so that I could see an eternal distance to the sides and in the far distance, but it nothing like I'd ever seen before. And I wondered, what am I looking at? And way far in the distance, and I from now on I talk in metaphor because there's no physical structure to this. And so this intelligence, this spot of light, this and when I say intelligence, I don't mean like the smartest guy you ever met, but I mean like the intelligence of all the smart people in the history of the world, all in one organization, came rushing toward me from this great distance and communicated to me directly, I'm taking you. And I put up all my resistance because I've been driving myself all night in this deep survival mode. I mean, this is serious. I left out all the serious stuff. This is serious life and death every single moment. Yeah. It was. We were fighting staying alive, and I had consumed all of my fat, and I consumed all my liquid was gone. I had frostbite. I was hypothermic. I was in a terrible situation, and my partner Tim was too. It was desperate. And so this intelligence comes rushing toward me and communicates to me telepathically, non-linguistically, no language, no words. I'm taking you. And I said, no, you're not. I don't know what you are, but all this is very, very quickly running through my head. And I put up all my resistance against, and it just took me like I was like breaking the thin layer of ice on water. And I'm out. And next thing I know, I'm being carried through up this, well, I hesitate to say tunnel, although the vision of my understanding became more narrow, but the space I was in was still, I couldn't see the end of it. Mm-hmm. And it all happened so fast. It wasn't this long journey up this tunnel. It was like, boom. And I was content. I wasn't scared. I was comforted. This intelligence continued to comfort me. And then next thing I knew, I popped out into this eternal greater darkness of infinite illumination. It was these two things at once. And I could see in every direction all at once. And I was a little tiny, in comparison, orb of non-being. I had no corporeality. I was simply, all of my senses were all one thing, and my brain was one thing with that. Only I had no brain, and I had no eyeballs, and no nose. I was simply all of myself contained in sort of a unit of like a big bubble. Yeah. Like a luminous bubble, but I was also 10,000 times bigger than Peter. And I was not frightened whatsoever. The first thing I remember thinking was, this is me. I'd forgotten that this is me. I was totally content with being this unified being. And in the midst of this greater darkness, all these things, and I talk about them in a timeline, but there's no timeline to this.
Yeah.
It is all time at once and no time at all. And a portal appeared to me, and I describe it in the book. Heaven is beautiful, like a doorway that was 70 yards tall and 30 yards wide. But that I made that up because I don't know how to tell you what it looked like.
Yeah.
I could talk about it as like an opening, like a round opening that had no edges, but it had this flow to it, and it was transparent and translucent at the same time. It had this surface area to it, and yet I could see this super long tunnel that was infinite, and of a different darkness than the outer darkness.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew that it was where I was being led to go.
Mm-hmm.
And when I touched this surface area, I found that it was all living, like capital A, capital L. It was all life, all living, all being, all everything beyond the universe and the universe itself. It was all life, and it flowed into me when I touched it. And at the same time, a voice spoke inside of me, but also spoke around me. And it had no language, and it had no gender, and it had no words. It spoke with a totality of meaning contained in a single communication. And the voice said, my name, and it called me into being, and I saw simultaneously the origin of myself, like a photon, made from all photons compressed into infinity. If that's an opposite, okay?
Yeah.
But it was everything's like this two things at once kind of play, superpositioned. Everything's superpositioned, everything's entangled, and even as this photon of light, I was both particle and wave at the same time, and I was connected to the divine, and I was separate from the divine. But I could see that the origin of my being as a created soul was in comparison to the infinity of creator. Mm-hmm. And I saw the long tail of my soul. I describe it as it's the age of my long soul self precedes my by eons, mm-hmm. but it's also timeless. So it's hard to explain. And kind of on the surface area of this was Peter, way far away from the origin of my being. And my name was is unpronounceable by my tongue. I can't tell you what it is, but I because it's not Peter, because they're not talking about me. I was called into being, and I knew that I was created. I knew that everything about me had been known since the moment of my creation, not just my life as Peter, but that's what I went through. I went through the life review, and I had no parts of me hidden. I knew that I was known by the knower, and the voice said to me, I know you, I made you, nothing is hidden from me. And I went through variously, could be called hell of my own making, or in Catholic language, purgatory. I suffered all the pain that I gave away in my entire life from the point of view of the person I gave it to. And what I discovered was that the little tiny bit of pain that I thought I gave away in each of those incidences turned out to have been magnified 10,000 times more than I had ever imagined it could be, and that I had actually given it to myself. All the pain I gave away, I carried with me. And it was in each, as I said, incident of it was magnified much larger by magnitude than I had imagined. And all of that was an accumulation. And I went through a sequence of experiencing that pain as the other person, and experiencing my own justifications and rationalizations for those actions that I took intentionally or unintentionally, all of them. And I self-judged as guilty, as shameful, but not because I was bad, because I was created. Because simultaneously, I could also see that all human beings and all sentient beings are crude in construction compared to purity. And it's our very existence creates the dynamic that we do bad things and good things. We can't help ourselves from doing bad things. It's like when you're in traffic and you stop at the red light and you turn, you look, you turn out, you turn right, but you didn't see the guy and you cut him off by mistake, but you never notice. Yeah. But this guy behind you, she's like, ah! That I went through all of that too. All the things that I didn't even know that I did, that was an accumulation. And meanwhile, the voice is saying to me, and I use a capital V when I write it, I love you, I made you, I know you, I forgive you, I've always loved you, I've always loved you. And it was the love that was given to me in my lifetime, and the love that I gave away in my lifetime. And I was a born-again Christian. So, but my perception was a little bit different. Yeah. And my perception is that love itself was my salvation in that time period when I was dead, because it seemed to me that the overwhelming amount of love with a capital L, all love of all beingness, allowed me to see the love that I carried with me while I was seeing the pain. And I turned to the divine. I repented. And my repentance was that love was all there is. It made it really easy. It wasn't like I had to make a decision. It was more like a compelling, look at me, just see me, just turn to me. And all of the pain that I ever had was gone. Everything, not just the pain that I gave away, but everything. I was cleansed in the language of Christianity. I repented, and as Teresa of Genoa, I like to quote her. She talks about the purgative fire of divine love. Love itself burned me clean, and I was then also simultaneously infilled with the oneness of charity, love, beneficence, mercy, forgiveness, truth, compassion, intelligence, all knowledge, and all joy, adoration, bliss, paradise, heaven. And I was infilled to the capacity of my supersized soul. And I felt like at one more drop of divine presence, of oneness of being, and I would have been obliterated and gone back into the oneness itself. And I remember thinking, I can know everything I've ever wanted to know. And all my questions were asked all at once. And I knew all of the answers all at once. And I wouldn't be like, what's going to happen tomorrow kind of question, but more like a question of what's the structure of all the universe from a molecular level to the expansion to the moment of creation and the edge of the Big Bang, that kind of thing. And I knew all of it. It's just like, boom, right inside me. And even that I knew was all limited. All of this oneness I experienced wasn't the totality of the eternal creator. I couldn't contain it. If one more drop entered into me, and I said, with no language, "Am I dead?" And the voice said, "Yes, you're dead." And I said, "I can't die now. My sister had vanished from my family, run away. My mom broke, and I feared for their suffering." And then God took me and showed me all of Earth all at once, 7 billion people in the flash of a thought, and every single human being was covered with a veil, and I could see every individuated human being acting in their life. Some were sleeping, some were making love, some there was engaged in violence and mundane life. I could see everybody everywhere all at once, and the voice said to me, "In the way that I love you now," which was infinite. I have always loved you and always will love you. And it's a love that's 1,000,000,000,000 times greater than the greatest love I've ever experienced on earth. I knew the truth of my being belonged to the divine love. I knew I was made of love, and I was beloved, and God was my beloved. And I knew that every single human being was beloved as well. They just couldn't see it beyond the veil. And the voice said to me, "All is well, all has been well, all will be well," which I found out later, Julian in Norwich, that was her big thing.
Mm.
And I'm, I contain these things of my experience in the language of others too. But the meaning was true, and I understood. I could see my parents' faces, and I could see their current suffering, and I knew that they would suffer greatly if they lost me too. And I said, I can't stay. And cutting the story down a little bit more, I asked to come home to here. And God said, yes, you can go home. And I said, can I come back here to the oneness of being? And God said, yes. And then I said, well, then I choose to live my life. And God said, you won't live your life, and sent me back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So that was your first near-death experience.
Most of it is to make it shorter. I cut a bunch of stuff out.
Yeah, I know. It's so. I love to hear you tell it, because it's interesting. You touched on so many things, but one of the things we talked about before the interview was the necessity for the use of metaphor when we're talking about these things.
Right.
And I heard you say several times, I can't describe it to you. I can't describe it to you. So you give me something that it's like. And the reason I wanted to bring you on today, because I want to talk about some of the metaphors that I think have become myths in some of our faith traditions, that we've taken things that were written metaphorically, and we've taken them literally. And one of the things I wanted to talk to you about was the subject of hell. I was having a conversation with some people the other day, and it's on my mind a lot anyway, but we were just talking about this notion that God creates us with this original sin. So we're created flawed, and then he punishes us for being the way that he created us by eternally tormenting us. And I heard some elements of that kind of in your story, but not literally, right? You were saying that in comparison to God and in comparison to the infinite, we're limited. It doesn't mean we're evil. And you talked about a purgatory type of experience, or a hellish type of experience, but it wasn't punitive, and it certainly wasn't eternal.
No. And I'd like to push back for a second here and talk about Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell's perspective on myth is that myth is a story that tells the truth with a capital T, but isn't necessarily true with a small t.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the mythification of metaphor, I would lean more heavily to the literalization of myth.
Yes, exactly.
And so just to say that, I saw this meme the other day, and it was a person on a spit above a fire being roasted, and the God character who was turning the spit saying, "If you don't love me, I'm going to roast you." And I'm like, if you don't love me in the way, if you don't love me in the way that I want you to love me, which to me sounds like an abusive relationship. I work a lot in domestic violence, and I sit on the state of Maine's domestic violence homicide review panel. And, I read these for years, and it sounds abusive to me.
Yeah.
And my experience of the divine was not that. It was more like I had accumulated, like, it's Christmas time. So we get everybody's Jacob Marley. I said Bob Marley. One love. One love, though. Jacob Marley and Ebenezer Scrooge, these are the chains I forged in life. I had forged chains in my life that had prevented me from entering into the oneness of being. And so I didn't go to like a corporeal place. I went directly to what the Christian mystics call the unitive state of being, where self is obliterated. Even though I was still a containment of soul, I was still somehow one with God and separate from God. But I was also in this place where I was completely, there was the part of me that was Peter was way back behind me, and not really part of my experience. I remembered back to my parents. I remembered back to Earth. It wasn't me.
Okay.
So, but yeah, in terms of hell, I saw that love is all there is. I saw that every single human being is created in love, and not just human beings, but all sentient beings, and not just earthly human beings and earthly sentient beings, but beings everywhere. I can't remember who said it, but the universe is secretly made of love. And as for why is there suffering? The Four Noble Truths of Buddha. The first is, life is suffering. We all know that is true, but we also know and that I tie to the sinness of being.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, in order to be in the material world of time and space, there had to be a corruption of purity,
Mm-hmm.
a lessening of the wholeness of eternity, or else we wouldn't exist. If this was only pureness of being, it wouldn't be Earth or the universe, it would be heaven. But it wasn't a negative thing, as you said, Brian. It was a fact of existence. It's like, the science, great thing about science is that you don't have to believe in it. It either is or it isn't.
Right.
And in this, it's kind of like this was for me. It's just the way it is. Part of the isness of being a human on Earth is the corporeality of suffering, and that includes hurting other people.
Right.
So, is there a hell? Was I in eternal hell? Well, I didn't have any concept of time, so it felt like maybe for me it was eternity, but maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just this that fast. I really don't know, and I know from reading other near-death experiencers that they don't go through that. But I also know that I'm beginning to think, it's a better way to put it, that there are different kinds of near-death experiences.
Yeah.
And the one that I had was an extreme. And I had wrong language that happened to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think my opinion after talking to several near-death experiences is they're highly individualized, highly customized experiences. So we can't take any one of them and make it universal, even though there are some universal elements to them that kind of run through a lot of them. And where you go when you have a near-death experience is not necessarily where you go when you die. I think that, because people so some are physical, some find themselves in a place of flowers and walking along a path and walking along a beach. Some people find themselves in a non-corporeal state like you did. But I think there are some lessons we can draw from them. And even some people say, okay, when we die, we just immediately go to bliss. And, that's the kind of the opposite extreme of what I was raised with was most of us are going to immediately go to torment. But I think there are different places, different levels, different experiences, just like there are here on Earth. And this binary choice is what I was taught as a child. It's either bliss or it's torment, and it's eternal. Either way, you make a decision here in life. If you hear about Jesus and you reject Jesus, then it's torment. If you hear about Jesus and you accept Jesus, then it's bliss. And I think what we can determine from these experiences is it's not that simple. It's not that binary thing, and it's not based upon just whether you confess Jesus as your savior or something.
I agree. Because, before Jesus walked the earth 2,000 years ago, the history of humanity, hominids, goes back, 500,000 years?
Yeah. Exactly.
And so let's burn all those Neanderthals and Denisovans and, so I struggle with the whole concept. I lean into, in my mansion, there are many rooms. If you're going to use metaphor to talk about these multiple levels of heaven, then that's the one that I would use if I were in the Middle East 2,000 years ago and only the king had the palace.
Yeah. It's interesting, Peter, for me, because I was raised to take all this stuff literally and didn't even know there was a metaphorical understanding of it, right? So the creation story, Noah's Ark, all that stuff, it either literally it happened or it didn't happen at all. And like what you said earlier about, myth is truth with a capital T, but it doesn't necessarily have to be historical. And so we have to, as we're reading these scriptures, we can either throw the whole thing out because it's not literal, or we can try to get to what are they trying to say? What's the point of the story?
Well, there's a reason that literalism arose 150 years ago, because it was afraid of science. By the time 150 years ago, when literalism first began, science had been around, the scientific method had been around, and confronting religion, who held the keys to all belief, including scientific belief, and was proving that things weren't exactly as the Bible said. Evolution being a prime example of that.
Right.
And so the two streams basically developed in the United States out of Western Protestantism, and you got your literalists and you got your mainstreamers. And your mainstreamers went heavily intellectualized. You get the congregational churches are a great example in New England. The glass is clear, the buildings are square, there's no dark corners, and the preaching was more historical critical.
Yeah.
What can we do? What they call deconstruction, or I can't remember the name. There's some ecclesiastical word for it. Anyway, but the literalists use their scientific thinking to solidify and calcify and create a thought loop within the Bible.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about Noah's Ark that you probably would never taught, is that there are two Noah's Ark stories, and there are two chapters apart. The first Noah's Ark story is the one that gets painted in a mural on every little child's, bedroom or in the church nursery. But the other story is that there were 7 animals of each good kind brought aboard the ark.
Mm-hmm.
And those are in contradiction to each other.
Right.
There's a lot of stuff that literalists conveniently ignore.
Well, they're two creation stories.
They're creation stories, myths.
Yeah, there are 2 in the Bible, and
the first and second chapter.
Yeah. And again, I wasn't taught that. I was so we're not taught these things, and again, I was taught it's either all true or it's not, and true being literal.
Well, if it's not all true, then Jesus didn't rise from the dead.
Yeah.
If it's not all literal, then that didn't happen. So to get to that, you have to believe the whole kit and caboodle, is what they say. And they're wrong, frankly, and that gets me in lots of trouble. But I come at the Bible. I should tell the audience this too: is that I went into my near-death experience as a Christian, a born-again, charismatic, speaking in tongues.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
mm-hmm.
Christian. I came out of it with no belief and no faith at all. My Christianity, my faith, was completely erased from me. Mm-hmm. And what replaced it was knowing that I'm known by the divine beloved. And that's all that matters to me. And I chose to go into religion as a study in order to find other people like myself, because this is back 1980, when this all began for me, when near-death experience wasn't common. I was afraid to tell people, and so I went to Yale to study mysticism. Mm-hmm. And I toyed with the monastery, and I practiced yoga. I ended up in the Marcel Marceau's student of a student, and he taught hatha yoga with a chi factor and prana. And I found that was part of my experience, which is also taboo in the literalist world, mm-hmm. Toying with Satan. And so I kept my mouth shut for most of my life.
Yeah.
But I find in the scriptures, I find in the Bible, the opportunity for divine connection.
Yeah,
I do. But these days, I get I'm working my way through the Quran a little bit, and I can't say I understand it all because I don't.
Yeah.
But trying. So where were we? I'm kind of off the beat here.
Well, we were talking about literalism, and one of the reasons that prompted me to reach out to you at this time is I heard one of your sermons a couple weeks ago when you talked about the return of Jesus.
Oh yeah, he never left.
Yeah, and I was like, wow, I've never heard it put that way. So could you expand upon that a little bit?
Yes. So first, think about the end times. The whole political thing that's going on in the world, in Israel, and when the Messiah is coming again, and Armageddon, and the rapture, and all these kinds of things, and the end of time. Now, the time is as old as the universe. Now, we might get wiped out. Humanity might have the end of humanity, but time itself, mm-hmm. it's not going to end. Not because an asteroid hits us, or the sun supernovas, or any of those other things. Mm-hmm. So that's just a fallacy, first of all. But in terms of the light has always been here. It makes reality exist. And Jesus contained so much light that he radiated so that they painted pictures of him with halos, what people could call auras.
Mm-hmm.
And that began early on. So he more than charismatic, but he wasn't bringing heaven here. Heaven was already here, and human beings are always capable of accessing it. It's in every single molecule that there is divine love. And so I'll tell you how I finally, when I came back, I saw light inside every single person. I look in people's eyes. Even the people who consciously put the veil down, they still have a radiance to them. It's small, but it's still there.
Yeah.
It's in all things. And I began to see the light inside animals and their eyes. I've seen it radiate from the center of people's foreheads. It's because Christ never left.
Yeah.
He wasn't dying to take on the sins of humanity. Although, somebody pointed out to me the other day that I kind of took on all the sins that I gave away in my life, which is, I was like, I never thought of that before.
Yeah.
But no, he came to say that death is a fallacy. Death isn't real. And that the light's already here, and all we need to do is open up to the divine presence and love each other. That was his message. Love each other. So everybody's looking this way when really the best place to see it is right here between us.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we experience the divine the most. And even an atheist can experience love. And if God is love, then they're experiencing God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's, we go back to the thing about what is God or who is God. So, again, my background, Sunday school, God's this big old guy sitting on a throne with a long beard who's judging everybody.
Oh, he's white too. Don't forget that.
Yeah. Obviously he's white. But yeah, he's this big judgmental person that created us and judges us and says he loves us. But if you don't love me the way that I love you, then I'm going to burn you forever. And I'm actually writing a long thing about hell, and I was reviewing Calvinism again, the whole 5 points, tulip, right? So that God, not only is he saying, repent or burn, he's saying, I'm not even giving you a choice. It's not even up to you.
Right.
I elect who I'm going to save, and it's irresistible. So it's just the things that we have come to believe, and the things that we put onto this God that we've created. I hate to say it, but this is a God that we've created. It's horrible. It's horrifying to believe that God is like that, and it's crushing to our souls to believe that we are the way that we're taught, that we are evil, that God can't even stand to be in our presence. So as I came out of that and started talking to people who had near-death experiences and find out totally different image of who or what God is and who or what we are, and even in the not so pleasant near-death experiences, which do happen, right? Not everybody just goes right to bliss. Howard Storm had a very unpleasant experience, but eventually, you come to a point where you do find the divine and love. And everyone I've heard someone talk about it, it's eternal, and it's not punitive. It's not, I'm getting back at you for what you've done, and because I'm an infinite God, you deserve infinite punishment.
Yeah, it wasn't, what I experienced wasn't punitive. It was clarifying. Yeah. It's sort of like when I make ghee, and I get butter on the stove and I'm making ghee and I'm skimming off the cream, it was a purification process, and it was for my own benefit. Yeah. It certainly wasn't punitive. The voice was saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. I think that humanity's, a lot of the fundamentalist churches are growing these days because they have all the answers. They create parameters where people can feel comfortable knowing who's in and who's out and what the rules are. And human beings are sort of like that. Yeah. There's a lot more ambiguity and room for fudging if literalism is not true. And that makes people uncomfortable. People like the rules. And that's okay. If the divine is if the divine is reaching into their lives and they're staying moral, the serial abuser stops abusing because of his literalist belief. Well, thank God for that.
Yeah.
Not that
Yeah.
I believe that happens very often. Okay,
Right.
because so, but punitive God was not my experience, and it's left me with one of the things that I brought back. Lots of near-death experiencers bring back, whether they're walking in the meadow with the flowers and the butterflies, or going to the unitive state of non-being, is
Mm-hmm.
love.
Mm-hmm.
It's the message is the same that Jesus was bringing: love thy neighbor as thyself, love God above all things. You can't get more simple than that, and the rest of it is, what's the word? The rest of it is details.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's interesting because I've talked to a lot of near-death experiencers, and whether they're atheists before they have the experience or they're Christian or wherever they are, they come back and I was listening to, I think it was Trisha Barker the other day was saying that it's just all love. I mean, it's such a simple message. It's all love. It's all about love. That's the only thing that we take with us when we leave this place. That's the only thing that really, that's what God is. That's what we are, as we're made out of. And there's this fear, I guess, from the church that if we don't have the stick, right, that's the carrot, but if we don't have the stick, if we don't have the punishment and the hell and those and the original sin and all that stuff, then people are just going to say, hey, I'll just do whatever. I will just, it doesn't matter what I do because I'm going to be okay,
Well,
which is a
there's
very low view of humanity.
it is, but humanity is essentially mean. I mean, we're constantly spending what 2/3 of our national income on weaponry and war,
Yeah.
and that's just us.
Yeah.
And everybody else is doing, and there's wars all over the world, and people. Well, there's an argument to be made for the imposition of morality, for the capacity for humanity to hurt itself is huge.
Mm.
And so if we put, and I'm not arguing in favor of the stick, okay? I'm just saying that it has served a purpose in keeping us from being super mean to each other. But it's not the solution, okay? That's part of the veil. The real solution to the problem isn't the imposition of morality with fear, it's love. There's this, it's built into us to love each other. And the larger our capacity for love, the larger our capacity to forgive our enemies.
Yeah.
And we hope that they are on the same path as well. And one of oh, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
I was going to say, don't you think one of the big reasons, though, that we're so mean is because of fear?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Well, that's what I'm saying.
yeah, because we don't understand who we are. We don't understand who our neighbor is. If we knew who we truly were, that we are eternal beings, that we're eternally loved, that we're all basically one, we're so tribal. We're so scared of everybody else. And if we could get that message that we are all one, essentially, and I'll just start taking care of each other, even in this physical place, that we could change the world.
Yes. 100%, yes. And I think that the language that I use, the language that Trisha uses, is only a representation of the thing itself. Because when I'm in the presence of Trisha, or we're talking over Zoom, and she's not the only one. This happens regularly with people who've died and come back,
Mm-hmm.
and many people who haven't. There's with me, and with they do with other people. There's this connection of, like, I feel like there's a tube running from my heart chakra into your heart chakra, and there's a divine experience that's, and I hear his metaphor again, quantum, because it's fine. I find that I'm entangled with these people,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm entangled with their love and their light. And so the language that we use to communicate, that we talk about it, is only a representation of that. And that thing itself that's inexplicable, that passes between people, and can happen when you, at the moment when you and your lover orgasm and you meld together, and the two become one. It talks about in Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
When you become a one spirit with another person, then you see them, their utter divine being.
Right.
And that's, but the problem is that we're all built with this veil.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard for people to penetrate or glimpse through. And when they're threatened and they're afraid, it's easy to retaliate out of fear, even if you're an awakened person.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the veil. I think I've heard you say that, but I've heard other people talk about the veil between the worlds, right? The veil between us and the spirit world. And I've heard people refer to the body actually as the veil.
Yeah, the senses, your eyeballs, your nose, your ears, your physical touch, your body is your veil.
Yeah.
But it's more like in the Matrix, which without the evil machine overlord, replace that with divine love. But we're not only are we the veil, but we're inside the veil.
Yeah.
And when you're in the experiment, what's the Heisenberg principle? You impact the experiment. It's really hard to see objectively. Because when you're in the experiment, you are the experiment. Yeah. And so we're kind of stuck in this place where we're unable to easily perceive the light of the divine being, either inside ourselves or outside ourselves. But we're all built with this capacity for love, or 99.9% of us are, because there are a few sociopaths and those kind of people in the world. But even they are too at the core of their being. And as much as I think that they ought not to be allowed to impact the lives of other people, which is a very diplomatic way of saying that maybe some ought to be in prison.
Yes. Yeah.
All right. Unfortunately, but that's not really their fault. That's a biological thing. There's biology going on, brain chemistry, and electrons and chemicals and all these things. That doesn't mean we shouldn't protect ourselves. But even the core of their being, they're still made of love. Every single person, every single chickadee, every single maple tree, everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about, let's just real quickly talk about your second experience, your second near-death experience.
Yeah, so in an odd turn of events, as Heaven is Beautiful was coming out, as 2015, literally like the month before it was due to come out, I had 100% blockage in my widowmaker, heart attack. It's a congenital thing, runs in the family, and I died. I was at a yoga class, and I got someone in the class to transport me to the urgent care center. And I got a shot up of a decoagulant that gave me a 3% trickle through, but no painkillers, because morphine and opiates make me nauseous. So, and I've been meditating for 40 years. And so I know that meditation if you're in the state of meditation with a hyper focus, you can separate yourself from the pain that you're feeling. You still know the pain is there, but it's not as intense. But of course, the moment that you're not hyper focusing, it comes back. So I told the doc, no opiates. I don't want to be vomiting in the back of the ambulance with the heart attack, because that's what's going to happen. I'll just meditate. So on my way to Maine Medical Center in Portland, which is an hour and a half drive from my house, I died. I live in a pretty remote place right now.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. It's high aesthetic, but it's pretty remote. And so I died. And what happened was, as I was in the back of the ambulance, sirens going on, I'm meditating. I hear the paramedics say, "We're losing him," over the radio. And I'd been an ambulance attendant, so I was like, I know what's going on. So I open my eyes, I look up at her. She puts on her game face after she has this fearful face. I close my eyes again, and the next thing I know, all my pain is gone, and I'm out of my body, inside myself, going ever deeper into the beautiful darkness. And the same angel of death, this intelligence, came to collect me, speaking two voices at once, the angel's voice, but originating with the divine voice who spoke to me the first time, saying, "It's time to come home."
This is like 30 years later after the first one, right?
That's 1980 first, 2015 second.
Okay.
And I recognized immediately what was going on, and I wasn't afraid this time. I wasn't confused, because I wasn't really afraid last time when I was out of my body. I was just confused. And I had presence of mind, and the voice and the angel kept coming closer rapidly. "Come home, Peter. We love you. It's time for you to come home. You've done your job. It's all over. Come. But I thought to myself, well, I got a little time here. Let me think about this. I was like, hold on a moment. So I'm already going to be carried up, and I turn away and I look back inside myself, and I think about my son, my daughter, and my new granddaughter. And my son had made it to the urgent care center, And I'm on the gurney going out the door, and the doc, he tells him to say goodbye to me. I found out later that the doc had told him that I was going to die along the way, and I bet he better say he loves me. So last image I have of him is holding my hand and leaning in and saying, "I love you, Dad. I love you." And off I go. And so that's the first thing I think about my son. I think he's 26 at the time. Can I leave him? Is he ready? I think about my daughter who just left an abusive relationship with a man who came back from Afghanistan very broken. And they had a baby, and we had just rescued her out of the marriage and spirited her away to a safe place. Can I leave her? And can I leave the brand new baby who's now unprotected from this man who's going to be there for my daughter? And so I thought, I can't leave these people. So I turn back and I look at the angel and I say, "I staying." And I turn around and I go back in. And so here I am, and I made this kind of pact with my granddaughter in that moment that I'm here for the duration. I've been praying for 30 years to die. I have my meditation prayer, and I had a second prayer, which was, "Take me home, God, today." And that kind of went away. Now I'm stuck here as long as she needs me, and I'm happy to be here for her. We have my family, they call me the Golden Bampa because of my relationship with her. Because it's just, I'm sure that lots of grandparents have that special relationship, but for me, I came back for her. And so here I am, once again, trying to be in the world and not of it. I live with one eye in heaven and one foot on earth, and one foot in heaven and the other eye on earth.
Yeah. You and I did a show earlier. We did a special show on why we stay, why you stay, because you're interesting. And a lot of times people have near-death experiences and they want to stay there and they're sent back. But you both times have volunteered to come back because you've got a reason to be here. The first time to live the life that you lived up to this point, and now to be here for your granddaughter. So I feel like we do have reasons to be here. We've got a mission here. We're all going to go to a beautiful place, someday. But while we're here, we've got to do the work that we've been given to do, right?
Well, that's why it was the knowledge of the place that I'm going that gave me the strength and courage to come back. It wasn't so much the attraction of earth as it was the necessity of mitigating suffering and pain. Knowing that there is no pain, there's only healing and wholeness on the other side waiting for me. And also with an understanding of timelessness, that all time is contained all at once, and all the universes and heavens are all within the oneness of being. Give me courage every single day just to stay.
And the time here is not that long, I guess, right? 70, 80 years, 90, whatever it is, 100, 120. It's not
wink
that
of
long.
an eye. Wink of an eye. When I was dead, it was a wink of the length of my life was that fast.
Yeah. So that's a good perspective to keep in mind when we're having rough days.
Yeah.
Peter, I want to again thank you for being here. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for everything you do. I look forward to your talks on Sunday mornings. I would share those out when I see them.
Thank you.
I know you're going to go back into pastoral ministry. That'll be another new exciting chapter in your life. I want to go over your book again. Heaven is Beautiful: How Dying Taught Me That Death is Just the Beginning. And that's available on Kindle, Audible, paperback, every way possible. You can find Peter at www.peterpanagore.love, and that's Panagore. And I love the .love domain. I don't normally like those vanity domains, but I love that one for you.
Thanks.
So, Peter, thanks for being here. Anything you want to say to wrap up?
Thank you, Brian. It's really good to see your face again and have a chance to talk to you directly and look into your eyes. And thanks for your audience for listening in. And if you have any comments, I'm reachable and I respond to people.
Yeah,
so
Peter's very responsive. Peter's also on Facebook, and because you can find him through his website.
Yep, Instagram, YouTube, all those places.
Everything. All right, cool. All right, Peter, well, you have a great rest of your day.
You too, brother. Peace.
Talk to you later. Hey, thanks for watching. Before you leave, I'd like to just remind you, you can always find me at www.grieftogrowth.com. That's grief, numeral 2, growth.com. And you can schedule a free half-hour consultation if you'd like. Also, before you leave, please click on the like button here, click on subscribe, and click on the bell. By clicking like, YouTube will show the video to more people, and by subscribing and clicking the bell, you'll be notified when I release new material. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.